This is the NeMa conference in Athens, and I'm with Markus Reutimann, the Chief Operating Officer of Schroders. Markus, in your talk this morning, you mentioned digitalisation. But as far as you're concerned, can the custodians really deliver your vision of digitalisation? And can you tell us what the key elements are by which you would judge whether they have delivered that vision?
John, I'm very confident that global custodians, not all of them, but many of them, will actually be able to help us with the digitalization. At the heart of it is what we call data curation. And there are 7 elements I'd like to cite upon which I will make a judgment whether they have achieved it or not. There are new ways of data curation which can actually be monetized. The first one is asset tracking, so that we actually know the life cycle of an asset from the seller to the global custodian to the sub-custodian. The second one is transaction tagging, so we know across the life cycle of a sale and a purchase where the status actually is. The third one is risk analytics in the wider sense, because we have a lot of responsibility in terms of due diligence and care in the monitoring of global custodians or other partners we have, and a lot of the data which we need to source externally and internally, the global custodian also hosts, so we can actually use that information. The fourth one is alerts. There's a lot of information which can be digitalized in terms of operational risk, in terms of market events, in terms of issuer issues, in terms of regulatory change, etc. All these alerts would actually add quite a lot of value if they are being interpreted into data which we can then incorporate in our processes. The fifth one is a more controversial one. There are a lot of inefficiencies which asset managers have across their enterprise. It's quite normal. And I'm absolutely certain that global custodians will know where the inefficiencies are, either between the two partners or indeed with us and third parties, etc. And highlighting that will also be an opportunity to actually create commercial and operational benefit. And the sixth point I would make is regulatory reporting. So again, it would be very helpful if the data which we have to source internally and externally could be digitalized rather than being delivered by tape and stuff like that. And last but not least, I think there's also a very big opportunity to share systems of the global custodians in a private cloud. We all have portfolio accounting systems, we have corporate action monitoring systems, we have reporting systems, and I think over time there might be a business case where we can actually share with a small number of global custodians their systems, so I don't have to replicate it in my own IT architecture. So these are sort of 7 components which I would look towards what we call digitalization.
Can I just take one or two of them up? And the first one is, you want to have the various points in the transaction life cycle. Why?
Because we can basically ascertain where the operational risks occur. We can see whether a certain settlement has failed much quicker, because I'm talking about real time. I'm not talking about the next day, I'm talking about as soon as possible. And that gives us also an opportunity to assess our operational risks across the various jurisdictions we operate. And it gives us also more real-time data about credit risk, because some of the issues obviously relate to the counterparty we are dealing with. So it's more the knowledge and the early assessment of there is actually something happening, as opposed to the next day once the batches are run in both companies' systems. That's the main insight we're actually looking for.
And turning just to another totally different area, you talk about shared platforms, and you talked this morning about private clouds.
Yeah.
Can you give me an idea of the sort of application that you would see in those clouds?
Yeah, I can see that in corporate actions, the whole monitoring process we have to make sure things are being processed, and we basically capture data as well. Portfolio accounting, so the book of record, I think could also be virtual, that we actually share that and make sure it's properly reconciled. There are also benefits of actually comparing prices, asset prices, particularly for assets which are difficult to price. And there's also an opportunity to basically look at NAV, the net asset value, the fund price correlation and computation, to see whether early on whether actually our figures basically vary. Because as management company for our funds, we have a responsibility to do checks over the production of NAVs which we have outsourced. So these are data components, data comparisons, which will basically help to identify early ineffectiveness or inefficiencies on both sides.
Maybe just a final question. You deal with a lot of global custodians because a lot of the global custodians are appointed by the investment funds you manage rather than by yourself. Can you get your clients to agree to your requirements when they appoint the custodian?
It is difficult, so that in Schroders, the client, the institutional segregated portfolio client, basically appoints his or her own custodian. What we do typically is help them in asking the right questions. We don't get involved in terms of service quality. We give them some statistics where appropriate, but in terms of selection and monitoring, it's down to the client to actually make sure he or she has appointed the right person. We can't, otherwise there would be a conflict of interest, which we obviously can't go into. For the fund side, where the fund board appoints a global custodian, which is on the basis of the management company's recommendation, we do a lot of monitoring, we do a lot of due diligence, we provide the fund boards with independent information, etc. So the two different worlds basically we're operating in.
And if you put it on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you put the global custodians?
In terms of?
Their ability to deliver.
I think it varies greatly. The ones we are engaged with, I would say 7 out of 10. And the ones which are engaged with the clients directly, it really varies greatly. So the same brand is seen differently and frankly provides different service quality in different countries for different clients. So I can't really competently rate those.
But those are 7 out of 10. What are the absent functions? What are the ones they find most difficult to deliver to you?
Yeah, I think it's the reporting side, the regulatory data, it's the asset data, it's the pricing data. That's the most difficult ones. And we obviously have timing issues as well in terms of striking the NAV for different funds. And I think above all, it's also the share classes. We have a number of really complex and sophisticated share classes, currency hedged, duration hedged, etc. And many providers basically struggle with providing that sort of complexity.
Markus Reutimann of Schroders, thank you very much indeed.